Hi, this is Ashley Pitzer, your host with Practicing Life podcast, and we're talking about commitment versus attachment today. The whole reason I am bringing this up is because I had a weekend where this came up for me, and I questioned, is this me? Is this me being attached to something, or is this just my commitment? And I had to sit with it and journal with it. And I even reached out to my coaches, not to necessarily be coached, but to tell them what I was thinking, what I was processing, what I was meditating on. Hence your lovely podcast today. So I always like to start off with definitions, and that's what we are going to do. Commitments. There's like 6 definitions for commitment. So I'm summarizing this a little bit, but it is you are willing to give your free time and energy to something. It is also obligating yourself to take action. And then the third one, there is dedication and loyalty to something. All right. So there's a very simplified definition of commitment. Attachment, to be attached, is connected or joined to something. There is an emotional component to attachment. There is the need or the feeling to be permanently fixed to something. All right. So if I could summarize these two really quickly before we even jump into this podcast, I would tell you that commitment, from my perspective, that the key difference is that there's an adaptation and a flow in the process. So a flow is like the river to me. It has turns, it has low points where the river may not flow as well. It has deep points, right? So there is a lot of change to this adaptation, evolving along the way. Whereas I would view attachment as something that you can't let go of. That you have something that it means to you emotionally, mentally, and you're holding on so tightly, clinging to it, if you will. So, this is a quote most people know, but I'm going to state it anyway. Buddha has told us that attachment leads to suffering. But why is that? Well, one of the things is because there's a universal law, just like we have gravity, what comes up must come down, a universal law that everything changes. Maybe not immediately, it could be really slow, but the whole point is there's a universal law that everything changes. So when you are attached to something, you're saying that it can't change versus a commitment, which again, there's a process, an evaluation that allows for change to occur. So when you are attached to something and you're not willing to change, then suffering happens. And it's more than just like, pain, suffering. I mean, it can be as simple as stress, right? The stress of what it does to your body, what it is mentally, anxiety. So, suffering happens because you're trying to protect your own way of being, your own identity, your own belief, whatever it is. You're trying to protect something and you're trying to stop something. So if we go back to that river, I want you to think about attachment as putting up a dam in a river, right? And what you're saying, like a beaver does, like a beaver will slow down aspects of the river by putting tree logs, and that kind of breaks up the current and the flow of the river and may make it safer. But in your instance, like if you were to be like comparison to like a beaver, you're doing something more than putting up logs. You're putting up a brick wall that says, no water can even pass through this. This isn't about slowing it down. This is about stopping it, stopping the change and resisting. And so anytime you have resistance, there is going to be pain, because just like if you think about a dam, the water pushing against the dam is the resistance. And that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of stress on that dam. So with, like, for example, with the hurricane Ian, I think that's what it is. My mom and my sister both live in Florida, right? And the dam broke, and I-75 had 15, feet waters like engulfing the highway because of the dam breaking. So if you can think about how much pressure stopping something is. That's where the suffering is. So you can be attached to a lot of things, a lot of things. I mean, we understand that we can be attached to people and objects like material things, but you're also attached to beliefs, like your way is the right way. And you can be attached to money. So this is where we see like a lot of hoarders because there's hoarders and money as well. Like can't spend anything. You can also have your hoarders for your physical objects because they have an emotional attachment to that, right? An emotional attachment. Let's just call it an attachment. So you can be attached to identities, labels. You can be attached to routines. I see myself in this a lot. So I'm confessing. I have attachments to my routine and I can get cranky sometimes when my routine gets messed up. It's just that I know what needs to happen when it needs to happen. And so when there's a day when that routine gets altered, like when you have a holiday, like it's like all of a sudden I'm saying the wrong day, and then like you're like, oh, I keep thinking it's a different day because like this happened, right? But that's okay. Like I can laugh about it and let it go, but so the whole point is you can be attached to routines, outcomes, emotions, even your thoughts. Like this is one of the things that we talk about, like unhealthy positive affirmations, like when your mindset, it can be so positive that you don't allow yourself to grieve or to have anger or to have any other emotion because you're so attached to being a positive person that it actually becomes like harmful. So there's so there can be attachments to thoughts, to emotions. We see this a lot, like when I'm coaching people, I see this a lot with like when you're wanting to make a change in your life, you as the person who's coming to me either to be coached or to be hypnotized, you're attached to a certain way of being. And so even though you may consciously want to make that change, there is an attachment to certain feelings that come up to you. So there can be this, I'm losing the word. There can be this disintegration anxiety that happens. So when I coach people, let's say on money, who have always, as soon as they made money, they immediately went out and spent money and have this like self-sabotaging behavior. There's like an attachment also not only to your ways of being and your habits, but to the emotions that come up. So when you start to make those changes and start to save up money, and all of a sudden you're not having that emotion of anxiety and stress of like, oh, I don't have money to pay my bills, or I'm, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. Like when those start going away and you feel like this empty void from having this lack of even emotional stress and trauma, right? Even that, sometimes you're attached to those emotional things and we have to coach through that. So you can be attached to going to a specific school. You can be attached to prestige. I did this in college. Like I had a full ride to a certain college and I was like, no, that's not prestigious enough for me. So I totally did this when I was in high school. And so you can be attached to like certain careers, what it means to you. You can be attached to job titles. You can be attached to having an office versus a cubicle, right? There's all these things that you can be attached to. You can be attached, and this is one of the things that I also coach on, but you can be attached to looking a certain way. For instance, attractive. This is very common. So one of the things that we see, like if you're attached to this looking attractive, not accepting yourself as you are and loving yourself as you are, because you have this image of what you are supposed to look like in your mind, and you're attached to what this is, then this can lead to excessive dieting, excessive working out. It also leads to anxiety and stress and depression and eating disorders. And it can even lead to like self-harm behaviors. So attachments are quite different from commitments. And we're going to go into this, but we're going to stick onto the attachment theme because a lot of people go to attachments. And like I said, attachments lead to suffering. I know it leads to suffering in my own personal life. I know it leads to suffering in my clients. So it's a common theme amongst all of us. So I would tell you one of ways to know if you're attached to something versus commitment is to look at whether or not you're judging something. Because when you're committed to something, it's more from observation. Like you're noticing something could be done differently and you're willing to do it differently because you understand that there's going to be processes and there's going to be a flow to it. And you're willing to try whatever because you have a devotion to a certain possible outcome or result that you're looking for. Attachment is not about evaluation and observation. It is judgment. It is comparison. So a lot of times you may be comparing yourself like, oh, I have this job, so this means this, and this means this about everybody else. So, like for instance, you may want a prestigious subdivision because this means status to you. And so you're very attached to this. I know a lot of people that are attached to wearing brand named clothing or having brand named purses because that gives them status, that gives them recognition. But all of that stuff is internal. It doesn't come external. But in their mind, they're very attached to this. So they will go, and spend a lot of money. They will even go into debt just to make sure that they have brand named clothes and house. Like they have the best house, they have all of these things. Now, I value quality. So, this isn't about judgment, but this is about understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it. Commitment to valuing quality is quite different to being attached to a certain brand or having nothing but brand names. So one is inflexible and the other is flexible. So commitment, there's flexibility to it. Attachment, you're clinging on to one way and this is the only way. This is the right way for you. It cannot be any other way. There's also other differences, right? So that judgment piece. So this is right or wrong is a judgment piece. Whereas like commitment is I'm willing to be open to different ideas and different possibilities. Then there's also something that happens mentally in your brain with attachment. So this is another way that you can see a difference. So one of the things that happens with attachment is it becomes like an identity or a belief system over time. Maybe not in the very beginning, but over time it does. And so instead of having that separation between you and whatever it is that you're committed to, when it becomes attachment, it becomes personal. So, like for instance, one of the things that I've had to change my wording on, and I'm sure you can look past on some past videos and watch me kind of pause because for the longest time, I'm going to give you an example. For the longest time, I used to say, like, my daughter has seizures. So I was putting that identity for her as seizures. And now I say things like my daughter has a diagnosis. That's what it is. She has a diagnosis of epilepsy. She is not seizures. She is someone who has a diagnosis of epilepsy. So I make that distinction now and I'm intentional about it. But this is where a lot of people, they become their disease, they become their illness because that's what happens with attachment. You cannot separate yourself from the item or thing, whatever it may be, the outcome that you're attached to. I'm going to give you an example for runners or anybody out there that's athletes, because this is something I've worked with a lot. So I'm really familiar with it and I'm going to stick with what I know. Okay. So when you are committed, so for instance, if I have somebody, and I'm going to give myself as an example too, but if I have somebody that I'm training with to win a competition or to meet some type of goal in their competition, they are committed, they're showing up, they're taking action. Commitment is taking action. And we evaluate all along the way, what's working, what's not working, what's most effective for them. And we're making changes, right? But when you get somebody that is attached, so I'm going to use runners as an example. When you get somebody who's attached to, I am an athlete, I'm running this competition. If they were to get an injury before, after, during, whatever it may be, they're so attached to being a runner, they can't allow anything to get in the way of that, because that's attachment. That's saying I'm inflexible to change. So if they get an injury, they basically say, okay, like I might be willing to give a day rest. I might be willing to give 2-day rest, but then I'm back on it because I am attached. I am their threshold. Their threshold for that suffering, because they're so attached to something, is minimal. So whatever their threshold may be is all they will allow themselves to heal, because then the suffering becomes too much. They identify themselves as a runner or as an athlete, and they have to get back to what they know and what they do. And it is suffering to be away from that. So I'm going to give myself as an example. I was attached. One of my bucket list, my bucket dreams, whatever you want to say, one of my bucket lists was to complete an Ironman. So I started off with the half Ironman, and I trained for this all along the way. And I knew I was starting to get some injuries with my knee and pushing my hip. And so when I was running, I was compromising, what I was willing to do like in the sense that I was willing to stop and stretch and rest, and then I would keep at it. But I was so attached to getting a specific time on my half Ironman, and I was so attached to completing it. It meant so much to me. Attached always has an emotional aspect to it. So I was very attached to I'm an athlete. I am going to compete this. I am going to get this time. There's 3 attachments just right there. So in the middle of my half Ironman, when my bike, my feet are clipped in. So for those that don't do triathlons, your shoe is attached to the pedal and you have to turn your foot to the side. And when I did that, I was so exhausted, and I also had made a minor change to my bike the day of your race. You're never supposed to do these things, but I did. And so when I swung my leg over, I hit something on my bike that I had made an adjustment for, and I wasn't used to it. And I turned and I set my foot down wrong, and I ended up tearing my meniscus. So I had shooting pain in my knee, and I knew that there was something wrong. But I was so attached to completing this race, and not only completing it, but completing it as close as possible to my time, because I knew once my knee hurt that bad that there was no way. Now, if I was just committed, the way that my self-talk would have been was like, this pain is abnormal. This pain is letting me know that there is a problem, and it is okay for me to change my plan. It is okay for me to be flexible. I can run, I can compete in another race, but that's not what an attached person does. An attached person says, no, there is no other way. This is the right way. I am going to push through this, whatever it costs. I don't care, because that's the other factor. Is what does it cost you? And when you're attached, you don't care what it costs you because of that attachment issue, what it means to you, right? And so I was so attached to completing this race and to getting it as close as possible to my time, my goal time, that I ran that 13.1 miles with a torn meniscus, shooting pain. I had to walk so much because of my knee. I was like one-legged running and dragging my knee behind me. And everybody was like, oh, I can tell you're in pain, right? It didn't matter. I was so attached, right? Then I had to have knee surgery. And now I'm 2 years post this, and I'm still working on rebuilding this. But I have let go of so much. And that's the difference, right? Where I can operate from today is like, if the same thing happened to me today, I could be like, okay, I'm not willing to pay this cost. I can run another day. Like, right? But that's some of the differences, is that when you're really attached to something, the possibilities become restricted to you. I really want you to understand that. When you're attached to something, you're so tunnel vision. You're so tunnel vision. This is all you can see. And everything out here is not available to you. You're not operating from 100% possibility 100% of the time, because your attachment is tunnel vision, and you can only see what you really, really want. And you're so attached to it. You're so emotionally invested into it. So, all right. there's this inflexibility to allow for change. This is why people get stuck. This is one of the things that I help people with coaching and hypnosis, right? And what the thing about it is when you're attached to something, it becomes a habit too. And that's what the stuck is. You're repeating the same patterns and you may want different results. You may want to be a better wife. You may want to have more fulfillment in your life. You may want to have a promotion in your career. As I coach a lot of coaches, so you may want to attract more clients, but you're stuck in the exact same patterns because you're attached to something. And sometimes you're even attached to the suffering. One of the things that one of the coaches along my path used to say was, I had to let go of my attachment to suffering. That can become a part of the known and a part of the process, and you can hold on to even that feeling. So, like, for instance, like when I'm coaching a client and they're not getting the amount of clients that they want, we go sit down and say, well, where's your attention? And your attention is on the fact that you don't have the clients that you want. And that is creating some type of emotional effect for you because it's meaning something. It's meaning that you're not competent or you're not confident or that you're not good enough at what you're doing. And this creates an emotion. And then you become attached to this berating type of behavior. These are attachments. If it was just commitment, I'm relating this back to commitment now. If it was just commitment and you noticed, hey, I'm not getting the responses I want on social media. I am not attracting enough clients. This is an observation without emotion. This is just saying, here is data that I have gathered. I had 10 clients last month. I have 3 clients this month. This is data. It doesn't mean anything. What can I do differently? What was working in the past? Have I changed anything, right? So you can start going through and evaluating, and you can still stay committed to making your revenue or to serving people, whatever it is that you may be. This is the difference. Attachment is like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting enough clients. Freak out. Like it means something to me. It's causing this emotion. And I'm saying all of this for my own life because I just had this weekend where I'm like, am I attached to this or I'm committed? Like, what's going on here? How do I separate myself from the situation and look at this from an altered perspective? Okay, so what else do I want to say about this? Right. I want to point out again that when you're in commitment, the getting stuck piece doesn't happen because you're committed to taking actions and you're allowing yourself umpteen amount of possibilities of action. You're saying, hey, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm willing to try this. That's like being committed, right? You're open to all of these possibilities versus attachment. You're usually attached to a lot of things like about it. You're attached to it, the outcome looking a certain way. You're attached to how you're showing up. You're attached to how it feels when you're doing this. So there's less of just being and more controlling. You want to control how everything is around the circumstance. Okay, so let's go over tips. Oh, I want to summarize the commitment, and then we'll go over tips. So commitment is simply an intention. And I love intentions. You always hear me talking about intentions. Intentions is saying to yourself, whether it's writing it down or speaking out loud, or even having an accountability partner where you are saying what you want to have happen. But then there's a piece of letting go of what actually happens. So you make your intention and you take actions that align with that intention. And you let go of the meanings, you let go of the outcomes, and you just keep chugging along, making adjustments, making observations, evaluating your process, and you're honoring the entire time. You're honoring what you want and you're working towards that direction, but you're allowing for, just like the river, you're allowing the river to take its turns. You're allowing the river to rise up. You're allowing it to fall down, and you're just riding the course. One of the things that I heard another coach say was like commitment is like getting your parachute on and then you jump out of the plane. Well, now you're just committed to this, but whatever happens along the way happens along the way. You're free falling, right? Your parachute's going to come out or it's not going to come out, or it's going to come out early or it's going to come out late, right? You're just committed and you're going with the flow. Now, I don't necessarily view it that way, but I'm willing to share this with you. Maybe that means something to you. So, but I just want you to think about the fact that commitment is just saying what you're going to do, allowing yourself to take actions that align with it, and adjusting, being flexible all along the way. Let's compare that one more time to attachment. Attachment says, this is the way it's going to be, and you're like stickler on it. And so if you want to think about the like a hurricane, right? And you're like an immovable tree. So I'm giving you a different example than the dam. When a storm comes, when stress comes, when problems come, right? Are you going to bend? Are you going to snap? Because the more resistance you get, the more pressure you get, the more likely you are to snap if you're not willing to be flexible and bend. Okay, so let's go over some tips, and then we will be out the door and on our way to the next great thing in life. All right, so tip number 1, ask yourself what you really want. Now, you may already know this, but I'm just going to state this because I like people to start off here. What do you really want? Step number 2 is allow whatever emotions to come up for you, come up for you. So, for instance, for me this weekend, the emotion of disappointment, which leads to sadness, came up for me. I allowed that to come up for me. It was okay. I didn't make that emotion bad. It was okay that I was feeling sad and disappointed, right? So allowing the emotion to come up, because something most likely will come up when you're seeing what you want and where you are, that gap, okay? That's where a lot of suffering comes in, is because you want to be at point B and you're seeing yourself at point A, and there's a gap between point B and A. There's your suffering. It's because you're not where you want to be. And allow those emotions to come up. Allow them to be what they are. Let go of judging them. It doesn't do any good. Just let them feel your feels. And then when you're ready, dismiss them. All right. So give yourself space from the problem. This is the next thing I like to do. So like for me, I'm like, I'm not thinking about this anymore. So this is where maybe distractions come in. Maybe you move your focus to things that you really enjoy and that you love doing. Maybe you journal and you say, okay, that's enough for me for right now. We're going to think about something else. Whatever it is, get some space from it, because hounding and nagging yourself for a resolution doesn't make the resolution come up any faster. If anything, it repels it. So get it off of your mind, get space, feel free from it. Have that freedom from this issue that you're feeling really attached to at the moment. All right, be compassionate towards yourself. This is just allowing you to be you and accepting you. This is part of the process, and that's okay. Like, this is something I say to myself all the time. Everything will work out. I am exactly where I need to be. This is okay. Nothing has gone wrong. These are some of my common affirmations. So the next thing I would say, so you got 1, ask yourself what you want. 2, feel your emotions. 3, give yourself space. 4, be compassionate towards yourself. You're freaking amazing. Okay. And then 5, consider what it is costing you to keep this attachment. So this is where I really want you to dig in. What is your reward for keeping this attachment? What is it costing you? Are you willing to continue to pay this cost? What is more important? And this is where I coach a lot of people. So like, for instance, if I went back to my own example, and I was running my half Ironman, if I had a coach in my head at that point in time, which I didn't, I could have gone through the self-coaching aspects of asking myself, what is it costing me to continue to run on my torn knee? What is the long-term consequences of this? Even though I may not know the future, I may have been able to come up with some interpretations that would help me realize the long-term consequences. But when you're really attached to something, you sometimes, yeah, tunnel vision doesn't allow you to look at even what it is costing you. So I like to look at what it is costing me emotionally, and then what is that costing me? So it's like a step, like a hybrid here. So that suffering, right, is costing me suffering, and that suffering is causing me not to sleep well. And that not causing me to sleep well means that I'm not showing up as the best mom I can be. I find that I lose my patience quickly. So I can start looking at the myriad, is that what I'm trying to say? I can start looking at how all of this is unfolding because I'm really unflexible on allowing something different to happen from what I want, right? So this is what I'm asking you to do. Look at what it really is costing you, not just in this one area, but in other areas of your life. Step 6, change your story. So once, all day long, this is what I am. I am a storyteller. It doesn't matter what role I am playing, right? I'm a storyteller. So trust me when I'm telling you, tell yourself a different story. It's super important. It's why I'm so good at what I do, right? So once you figure out what you want, and it could be something different than what you thought you originally wanted. Once you've evaluated what it's costing you and you've come to a new conclusion, whether that's to keep what it's costing you and keep going down the same road, right? The definition of insanity, you are welcome to keep that same path. Maybe it's making a minor change, maybe it's making a big change, whatever it is that you are now feeling because you've looked at it from a different perspective and you're feeling like this is the way I want to handle this, this is the way I want to look at this, then you start telling yourself stories that align with this. Example of me running. Okay, it's going to cost me, losing 2 years of being able to exercise as I get knee surgery that could have been a minor one, now becomes a major one, and I have a torn ligament, right? Like it's going to cost me this. And this means that I can't do X, Y, and Z. This means that my husband has to do X, Y, and Z for me because I can't move around. Like once you start evaluating what it's costing you, then you go into what story you want to tell yourself to support your new thing. I am still a runner. I am still an athlete. This is just a minor setback. I am going to sign up for the next competition. I will be completely healed. I will run this race and it will be even a better time. I'm so glad that I'm willing to honor my body. Like tell yourself the story. If you have no money in your bank account, and you want to have money in your bank account and you're willing to say, okay, a lot of people go this direction. I don't necessarily like side hustles. I'd rather you find a job that you just got paid more money at. But a lot of people think, oh, I'll just stay with the job that I'm doing, that it's completely known and familiar, and I'll just get a side hustle and I'll work even harder, right? That's your choice. You've decided that this is what you want to do. And so then you tell yourself stories to support it. All right. I am able to maintain working a full-time job in this side hustle. I will still make time to do X, Y, and Z. Like, this is the way I see myself feeling when I get the money to pay off this loan or to build up money in my account. So you start telling yourself stories. This is how I see myself. I am competent. I am capable. All right. So those stories play a big part in it. Step 7, if you decide to let go of what you're attached to, give yourself a deadline to let go. I mean, you can totally let go instantaneously. I just know that there is a piece of like grieving over something. It may sound silly, but sometimes giving yourself a deadline, 3 days, a week, 6 months, like in a marriage, you might have, if you're considering leaving a marriage, it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months, it might be 9 months, where you say, okay, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to evaluate and blah, blah, blah. And if things haven't changed, if things aren't different, if I don't feel differently, if this isn't working out for me, then this is the date. Right. And so as you get closer and closer to that date, you can allow all of those emotions to come up and grieve and know where you're heading and know what you're doing and why you're doing it and what it's costing you, which leads me to the next point, which is to remind yourself the benefits of letting go. You wouldn't be letting go of something if it was working for you. The only reason you're letting go of something is because you see that it's costing you. You see that it's not aligned with where you want to go. Okay, so reminding yourself constantly of the benefits of what's going to happen when you are there. All right, so when I have 6 months worth of my salary saved up in my bank account, this is going to mean X, Y, and Z. This is how I'm going to feel about it. And you remind yourself over and over and over. You create, so that would be my next point, 10. You create mantras to support that ultimate outcome you want. Right? I am a successful entrepreneur. I am wealthy. Money flows to me easily. I am lovable no matter what happens in my relationship. I am good enough in my job right now. Right? These are just some common affirmations that we work with people on building them, right? And you continue to support yourself. So all along the way, it's making it easier and easier for you to let go. Then I would tell you to go into mindfulness, journal, breathe, do yoga, go to sound baths, go on walks, go take a hot bath, whatever it may be. Use water. If you're in the shower, one of the things I do, like especially if I've had a lot of stress or emotional day, when I'm in that shower, I just tell the water, I set my intentions. You are washing away what doesn't belong to me. Let go of the negative energy, cleanse me, blah, blah, blah. All right. So, and then my point 11 and 12 is to come see me, right? Or someone like me. Go see a hypnotist. Hypnotists are all about reprogramming the way that you're seeing yourself and your identity and your beliefs. And they are like a shortcut. All right. They make it so much easier to let go of things, to alter things, right? So I can't tell you how many times, like I want to say it's like a 95% ratio. Somebody comes into me and they'll say, I want help losing weight. I want help attracting money. I want to be more successful. But then when I start coaching them and we start digging into the problem, it's not the issue. It's just the symptom. It's not the root issue. All right. So this is one of the reasons why I would suggest for you to go to like a coach. I'm a coach, and go to a hypnotist. I'm also that, right? And work on these issues because it's going to help you get to your success point a lot quicker. Now, you're capable of doing this on your own. You're capable of working through these issues. I've given you 12 steps, but 10 of them you can do completely on your own. And even coaching, I self coach myself all the time, right? When I realize that something like when my nervous system has fired, I go into my breathing, take a deep breath, let it go. I ask myself, what am I making something mean? What am I attached to? What's going on? Right. And then I'll start coaching myself. What do I really want? How do I get aligned with that? What would I need to change? All right. I just wanted to wrap up and tell you all that you matter. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know how this resonates with you. And as always, if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, go look at the show notes and contact me. All right. Much love to you.